Hi, Pocket. Still alive, am I? Welcome to the mid-season finale of the 50 Hunt series. Over 13 hours of hunting and 50 faints in this one, but still alive. In Monster Hunter Wilds, when you hunt a monster 20, 30, 40, and 50 times, you're given a title. But not always. For some fearsome monsters, only 10, 15, 20, and 30 hunts are required. These titles do nothing mechanically, but they are something to boast about. I mean, who doesn't want to hold the title? Icebound but chill. This time, I'm hunting Jin Dahaad, my final apex of the 50 Hunt series, and the massive ruler of the Ice Shard Cliffs. This monster has its own unique arena with 4 areas, a ton of devastating attacks, and an absolutely massive body. And I'm hunting it with bow, a weapon I have very little experience with. What could go wrong? Jin Dahaad gives the titles Jin Dahaad, Chill, Hoarfrost, and Icebound. Prior to beginning this challenge, I had already hunted 15 Jin Dahaads, but hunting another 30 felt wrong. It's the 50 Hunt series after all. It's not just about the titles, right? It's about tradition, routine, principle, persistence. So, I'll be hunting another 50, up to 65. On top of that, a recent update released 8-star tempered versions of some monsters into the game. These 8-star tempered variants have significantly more health, deal more damage, and are much harder to inflict wounds on. Because of the inclemency resting trick, making it easier to spawn apexes like Jin Dahaad, I decided to hunt 50 exclusively 8-star tempered Jin Dahaads. A sizable challenge, and I'd have hundreds of thousands of health points to chew through in these 50, alone, apart from my Palico jettison, and without traps, but I was up to the task. I prepared my bow and set out. Only to fail. Immediately. Normally with these 50 hunts, especially when I'm picking up a new weapon, I struggle a bit, and expected nothing less bringing bow. I only had practice with 5 Gypceros, so I certainly wasn't a bow master by any means, but I hadn't expected to be brutalized so efficiently by this monster. I had not fully grasped the power of an 8-star tempered apex until that moment. Nevertheless, I returned to Jin's domain to continue fighting, and though its attacks were devastating, I managed to clear my first hunt in around 20 minutes. It was not without its harsh scrapes, however. 20 minutes was the longest hunt I'd ever taken part in as part of the 50 Hunt series. Even when I hunted 4 Hirabami in a single hunt with Charge Blade, it only took 17 minutes. The moment I cleared this hunt, I knew I'd bit off quite a bit. Bow still felt incredibly clunky in my hands, no fault of the weapon, and Jin left no room for mistakes or hesitation. 8-star Jin obliterated my health bar, seemingly on accident, occasionally killing me simply by walking too quickly in my direction. Bow's discerning dodge helped me stay alive, but Jin is so large and its attacks are so strange with the environment that sometimes it didn't even matter. A single mistake was likely to immediately result in a feint. A very unforgiving foe. Normally, I equip myself with a rather generic set for a weapon and try to tough it out. Ever since fighting Rompopolo with the Mizutsune Slickened Blade dual blades and overkilling that monster by quite a lot, I wanted to make sure I didn't overcommit. After all, I wanted the 50 hunts to be a challenge where I'm required to engage with both the monster and my weapon. If the monster never gets up or my weapon slays the monster before it can sufficiently act, it doesn't feel fair to either of us. But these hunts were different. After all, this time, I was the one getting overkilled. During my early hunts, I kept going back to the armory and checking my gear, switching my bows around, changing pieces and decorations, and feeding more and more armor spheres here and there just for a tickle of more defense. Anything to try and keep those Jin blasts from simply disintegrating me. But no matter how much I invested, it seemed like my life was fleeting. My first 10 hunts took me almost 4 hours. I failed 1 hunt outright, and I had fainted over 17 times, not counting the times that my Palico had to Vigor Wasp revive me. The first 10 hunts alone took more time than it had to hunt the 50 Hirabami, Nerscylla, Rompopolo, Chatacabra, and Quemetris all individually. If I kept up at that pace, I was in for around 20 total hours of hunting. That's a pretty daunting number, especially given the intensity of these hunts and how much constant focus it required for me not to die at any given moment. Hunting Chata and Quemetris with Greatsword had been pretty relaxing, and getting hit was rare or hardly consequential. Hirabami with Charge Blade was a flash pod fiesta. Rompopolo with Dual Blades was almost embarrassing for me, and Nerscylla with Switch Axe had been what they call aura farming. But hunting 8-star tempered Jin with bow, I felt like I was constantly on edge, and had to devote my entire attention to the game. I had to frequently turn down or off any music I was listening to, blocking out everything except for Jin, making sure I didn't slip up a single time. Many of these hunts ended with only a single life remaining, and I was constantly saved by the presence of Insurance Meal, a food buff that gives the hunter an additional life. One of the things I hear players often complain about in new Monster Hunter games is how easy they are nowadays. I heard this very much with Rise, and I don't have to travel far across the internet to be reminded of this common perception, that wire bugs trivialized getting knocked down. In Wilds, it's often that weapons have access to too many counters, either through the counters themselves, iframe dodges like dual blades and bow, or the offset attacks. In a vacuum, I suppose I agree. Anyone who has played Rise for any decent amount of time knows that wire bugging directly after a knockdown can often lead to immediate death. It's an option, and a strong one, but hardly trivialized anything, and even had an additional cost in the wirebug cooldown. Sorry for the wirebug rant, I'm a Rise fanatic. But the same goes for a lot of counters in Wilds. When I was learning dual blades hunting Uthduna, I rarely struggled to land the demon dodge, but there were plenty of Uthduna's attacks that I learned were not safe to dodge through if Uthduna was on water. The additional waves would cause me to get hit anyways. I had to be very precise with my dodges, or simply not dodge them at all, because of that shockwave. This happened again with Arc-Tempered Rei Dao. I enjoyed countering with Switch Axe, but the additional explosions made that strategy no longer really viable for a lot of those moves. In a vacuum, saying Dual Blades has an infinite dodge that can go through everything sounds absurd, yes, but it neglects some important factors. It cannot effectively dodge everything, and must be done while the Dual Blades is in Demon or Archdemon mode. If the Dual Blades hunter neglects their stamina or demon gauge management, their dodges offer no invincibility at all. The same goes for Bow's Discerning Dodge. Jin Dahaad had this massive blast attack that would absolutely tear me to shreds if it hit me, so I had to learn to Discerning Dodge it. At which point, it became a very useful method for acquiring my stamina back and refilling my trickshot meter. So tell me why. Why does this happen? Why, when I Discerning Dodge, does the attack still sometimes hit me and kill me? Well, it's because the Discerning Dodge iframes don't last longer than the blast hitbox does. If I dodge too early, and if at the end of my dodge I'm still in the blast area, I will still take the damage, even if I don't get knocked back. This resulted in so many of my feints and was really frustrating, especially when I had successfully dodged the attack in the first place. Much like wire bugs, the existence of Bow's Discerning Dodge is very useful, but not universally applicable. It's not a simple, easy to use solution every time. I had to make sure I was not only using Discerning Dodge at the right time exactly, but I was also angling it in the proper direction to get out of the way. If I used it wrong, I would often still faint. These powerful tools still have downsides, still have learning curves, and are still interesting. It can break my heart to see how they can be reduced to simply godlike abilities in some people's eyes. But these first 10 hunts were exhausting, and I began to question my own reliability, especially after dying to Jin's massive blast attack even after I dodged it over and over. Could I trust my own eyes? My own ears? If a Jin blasted me in a forest, and no one was around to hear it, No one but me. Would it even bother making a noise, considering I was most certainly already dead? I was so focused upon the game, it was hard to believe that it had been over 4 hours. Did I have anywhere to be? Is anyone waiting on me? For hunts 11 through 15, I started to experiment with new strategies. I had already made myself a new bow, the Zoshia weapon, but I tried out a few others, making and refining an Ardean one as well. I had to learn fast, and I wanted to engage with different strategies with the bow, bouncing between pierce and spread strategies, trying to find out what would deal the most damage. Jin wasn't killing me as often in these ones, so I had a bit more room to experiment. My discerning dodges were becoming more effective and reliable, and I was learning the massive, sometimes inaccurate hitboxes of Jin Dahaad's attacks. I had hypothesized that if I played very well, I could pull off around a 15-minute clear. That was my original goal. This hunt is often made more difficult to do quickly because Jin Dahaad spends a lot of time in this fight moving between areas and performing its ultimate attack in the 3rd and 4th areas. During these windows, it's incredibly difficult, if not outright impossible, to damage Jin, which sort of forces the fights to end up taking longer. Not to mention Jin's massive health bar. If the hunter faints at any point when Jin is in areas 3 or 4, it can take upwards of 45 seconds simply running back from the camp, not counting the time spent getting rolled back to camp and dumped by the revival palicos. In hunts 11 to 15, I managed a 15-minute 24-second clear, and I felt very confident about that. If I could clear consistently at 15 minutes, the remaining hunts would only take another 8 hours and 45 minutes, which felt a lot more doable than the agonizing 14 hours that it would have taken if I continued at the same pace as my first 10 hunts. But as I cleared my 15th hunt, I paused for a moment when I saw the notification that I had gained a new title. As I mentioned at the start, it only takes 30 successful Jin hunts to acquire the 4 titles, and I had already hunted 15 Jins prior to the start of this challenge. After my 15th hunt, I had acquired the last of Jin's titles already. I took a break to recollect myself. I had the titles. I had achieved a level of competence with the weapon. I had surpassed that test successfully 15 times. I wondered if there was anything more to be gained. I had more than enough of Jin's treasures to craft any of their weapons and armors. When I took a seat at the Grand Hub, it was raining outside. I felt a droplet strike the back of my hand. It woke me up from my daydreaming and reminded me of my tired fingers, always tired, and how dry my eyes were. I'd forgotten to blink for a while. I often forget to when playing games. It's a bad habit. But it was 15, not 50. The rest of my hunts, if I chose to indulge in them, would be purely on principle. To prove my strength, my willingness to persist, even when it seems like there's nothing left. Maybe no reason to, nothing left to be gained. I hadn't hunted 50 Chotacabras so long ago to start a business making cute little hoodies, nor for solely the pride of becoming Sticky Lick. No, I hunted 50 Chotacabras so that I would know Chata. But principle, persistence, what does that even mean? Walking through the rain when you can't see past 2 steps in front of you. Persistence, principle. Pummeling the untrackable rhythm of raindrops drowning out everything else. Like the constant hum of static in your ear. And it doesn't stop. Every road a river, and every sidewalk a pier. And it's hard to tell where you end and the water starts. Where my fingertips sever to become the controller. Walking through a sunken street on the bottom. As the submerged streetlights that guide your way silently crumple in on themselves at the mere pressure of an ocean floor. 35 more. Would it be any shame if I took a seat and crumpled like the streetlights? I consider this aquatic state if it were a dream. To whose consequence would it be if I failed? If I retired my principle, my persistence? A tiredness that infects more than the body, but the mind, perhaps even the soul. How many hunts can you endure, Eileen, my hunter, before you have had enough? Or would you hunt forever for me, your friend and maker? Alone, with Jin Dahaad. Only so much thinking is ever useful, and I've done enough thinking. Perhaps far too much. I hope you don't mind, fellow hunter. I'd been focused so much on defense, fruitlessly attempting to make it possible to sustain Jin's absurdly powerful attacks. So, I changed my focus. If I couldn't survive Jin's attacks, I wouldn't try to. Rather, I would make it harder for Jin Dahaad to survive mine. I made myself the Guardian Doshagama weapon, the highest raw damage bow available, and indulged in a forbidden technique. A dark magic I had refused to dip my hands into, lest I sink too deep. See, I've always known about the forbidden power of Gore Magala, and the frenzy virus it inflicts. Of the power it can give a hunter, while making them far more fragile. I crafted myself a set of armor to maximize my power with my new bow, indulging in 2 pieces of Gore Magala to inflict myself with the frenzy. With the antivirus, I would even gain benefit while recovering from the curse. On top of this, I equipped the Corrupted Mantle, another avenue through which I could disregard my own health for the sake of greater destruction. While in the frenzy state, and especially with the Corrupted Mantle, there was no chance I would survive almost any of Jin's attacks, but it didn't matter to me. I had to hunt, I had to kill, I had to persist. 35 more, and I wouldn't make it easy for Jin. I'd make it hurt. For my first 15 hunts, I had tried out plenty of strategies with 1,000 dragons, spread shots, and even some elemental weapons. But the most prominent strategy involved Dragon Piercer. This is an attack the bow has to fire a massive arrow, dealing damage as it travels through the monster's body. Because of how large Jin is, this can inflict tons of damage at once, though the effective range does taper off at a certain point. Alongside my new aggressive build, I began to seek out more opportunities to use Dragon Piercer whenever possible. After every roar, if I managed to discerning dodge, I had more than enough time to fire off a Dragon Piercer, and if I were to knock down Jin, I could sometimes fire off 2 or 3. By using the piercing shots and special ammo boost skills, I had maximized the power of my Dragon Piercer, blasting tons of damage through Jin's body whenever I could. This move was not without risk, of course. It had a long startup, and there were plenty of times I got punished by trying to pull off one of these, only for Jin to turn, start, and finish an entire attack before I was able to fire the arrow. These deaths were a painful setback, and I got very tired of running all the way back to the fight whenever this happened. Chasing Jin Dahaad through its arena over and over and over again, watching it roar and leave 3 times in the fight was probably the most frustrating part because it felt like there was nothing I could do to stop it. Unlike other monsters, quickly grabbing a wound does not prevent Jin from leaving. Even firing a Dragon Piercer perfectly through Jin during its departing animation will not cause it to flinch. No matter what, it will leave and head to the next area, forcing you to waste at least 2 minutes every hunt simply following Jin. But then, I learned something pretty useful and interesting that let me skip a lot of that. When I was in Clemency resting to spawn another 8-star Jin Dahaad, I noticed something. Sometimes Jin would spawn, but it wouldn't appear in the quest log. In fact, when I checked it, it would say, "Quest creation unavailable." I wondered why this happened when I first saw it, and when I went to investigate, I realized that Jin Dahaad was actually on the Ice Shard Cliffs map itself. How strange. I quickly ran over to investigate and found Jin half hanging off one of these ledges, terrorizing the monsters of its domain, and just causing a ruckus. In this state, Jin doesn't seem to have many of its ordinary attacks, often doing the Ice Beam Blast over and over. After beating on Jin for a while, it turns around to leave, and if you start a field survey on it right away, or save it as an investigation, this Jin actually starts in the third area of its arena. Because of this, I didn't have to chase Jin through areas 1 or 2, and it saved a lot of time. Especially because in areas 3 and 4, almost all of your available environmental damage spots exist for Jin. The first time this happened, on Hunt 20, I had a hunt that only took 11 minutes and 9 seconds. By far the fastest hunt I had against Jin, and the next hunt only took 11 minutes. These hunts weren't perfect, but they were faintless and way quicker than I was used to. If I could find a Jin in the world and start the survey after antagonizing it a bit, I would have 4 Jin hunts, 1 from the field survey and 3 from the investigation, that weren't as frustrating because I didn't have to do nearly so much chasing Jin between areas. This was a great trick, and it saved me a lot of time and made these fights a lot more fun. If you happen to find a Jin like this, I highly suggest you grab it. I much preferred these investigations. In these hunts, I struggled a lot to grab Jin Dahaad's weak point, the free wound spot that appears on Jin's face after performing one of its breath attacks. There are 2 reasons for this difficulty. The first is what they call a skill issue. I'm very used to how responsive a lot of weapons are with their focus strikes. Normally, when I hit the focus strike button, if I hit the monster, and there's a weak point, it immediately starts the animation. But a lot more premeditation is necessary with bow. Entering the focus strike stance, called Hailstorm, immobilizes the bow hunter. It puts you into a stance sort of like McCree's High Noon from Overwatch, where you highlight wounds and weak points. If you pull the trigger too early, Hailstorm won't even connect with the weak point, simply firing a weak arrow at the monster. This little symbol has to appear on the wound first. Then, when you let go, an arrow is shot off into the sky to come back down on the wound, triggering a successful weak point attack and staggering Jin Dahaad. But if the weak point no longer exists by the time the arrow connects, it won't work, even if the symbol appeared. This meant instead of simply focus striking a wound when it appeared and immediately cashing in, I had to enter Hailstorm stance, aim at the weak point until it charged enough, fire the arrow, and have it connect before the weak point disappeared. This required a lot of premeditation, and it took me a lot of these hunts until I was comfortable pulling this off. It was made even more difficult by the second reason. Tempered monsters have a lot less time between their attacks. They often pick their stronger attacks more often and leave less of an opening between them. This means for some attacks, even when they left a weak point, it was nearly impossible for me to land a focus strike, even if I was already holding the Hailstorm toward the weak point when it appeared, simply because the arrow would not land in time, even if I fired it as quickly as possible when the symbol appeared. As the hunts went on, I began to learn more and more about how long each weak point lasted. My favorite was definitely the one after Jin does this downward ice blast. The range of this blast is not too big, surprisingly, and it was really easy to simply evade by stepping back a little bit. The weak point on this one lasts a long time. I can see how it would be hard to grab this weak point with other weapons because of how high up Jin Dahaad's head is, but with bow, it was very easy to simply step back, hold Hailstorm, and look up through the flurry of ice to capture this target. Ranged focus strikes can have a field day with this one, and the opening was so long, I could even charge bow's focus strike until the 3 little notches appeared before letting it rip for the most available damage. Because these hunts took so long, I had a lot of time to think about efficiency. Hiding behind the ice while Jin prepared its invincible one-shot blast, I started to recognize little ways I could prepare for the fight to come. For other weapons, I would usually just sharpen and chill. By charging a shot, I could drain my stamina to feed the trick shot gauge, which is necessary for bow to use coatings and prepare tracer shots. I could fill up my coatings, load a tracer arrow, and enter the fight with Jin fully loaded. For a long time, this is the strategy I used during this attack. But even that got refined over time. I realized that after loading my coatings, I could hold an arc shot, which let me feed the trick shot meter without draining my stamina. It immobilized me, but behind the ice, it wasn't like I really wanted to move anyways. If I was close enough to Jin, I could even engage in the fight with a quick, fully charged arc shot. And then I could go straight into my strongest attack, the Dragon Piercer, charging the attack while the ice was still in front of me, and then letting it rip the moment Jin finished the attack, maximizing my uptime and preparing all of my damage to unleash it the moment I was free again. While the first hunts had been agonizingly exhausting, chasing Jin, hiding, waiting, fainting, these little weapon-specific tricks that I learned along the way not only helped these hunts go by faster, but they made these tiring moments a lot more engaging for me. It was a fun thought experiment. Apart from sharpening, what else could you do to prepare while hiding from Jin? When I started playing really aggressively with the Frenzy virus, I also started drinking Mega Demon drugs and using Might pills. These pills offer a strong but temporary attack boost. By taking a pill and then using the Arc Shot Dragon Piercer combo, I quickly came back into the fight with a huge wave of damage that helped me whittle down Jin much quicker. Another mechanic I found a fun trick with was when Jin climbs up onto the bridges in areas 3 and 4. Normally, Jin is very hard to damage up there, and this is still true with bow. Especially because I was using a close-range coating bow, antagonizing Jin while they were up there was not really that easy. Most of my arrows would fade away before I could land any shots. With other weapons, I'd normally just fire pods or throwing knives at Jin for some free damage while I waited for the bridge to be able to be pulled down. But I learned that the Tracer arrow has remarkably long range compared to bow's other attacks. Tracer arrows cost a lot of the trick shot meter, which is their main drawback. But Jin is constantly firing ice beams from this ledge, which are fairly easy to discerning dodge through. While dodging these, I was able to continually load tracer arrows and fire them into Jin while they would normally be undamageable. After connecting with a second tracer arrow, the first will explode for a pretty decent amount of damage too. This is a great way to sneak in extra damage against Jin during another normally pretty uninteractive moment. Because the tracer arrow explodes too in a direction, it could sometimes automatically pull down the bridge for me, triggering the guaranteed knockdown without me having to sheath and use the claw. Very useful. I had begun to feel very alone during these hunts, especially the early ones. Dying over and over, waiting, chasing. A true test of my endurance. But I was getting stronger. Better. The 39th hunt only took 8 minutes and 41 seconds. Far slower than any of my Guardian Doshagama hunts, but far quicker than everything else. My strategies were working. My frenzy, my demon drugs, my dodges. Though my hunts got considerably quicker, it didn't change the fact that these hunts were taking a long time. Especially when I didn't have access to the Area 3 skip, it still felt pretty heavy going into a new hunt every time. Knowing that no matter how many dragon piercers I fired down the snout of Jin Dahaad, I was destined for at least 10 minutes of listening to those damage noises. Not to mention, I always ran the risk of wasting time by failing the quest completely. Any simple mistake, often reflexively calling for my secret, could result in a meaningless cart. It felt horrible, like Dr. Hinton, my secret doctor, didn't intend to come save me in the first place. Rather, to lift me onto his shoulders into yet another death. But no matter what, I had to keep going. There's a strength in persistence, begrudging or not, and as my dragon piercer fired through Jin Dahaad, raindrops rolling down the back of my hand forming the smallest puddle beneath my palm, it was like I'd seen a shooting star. So I made a wish, that I could hunt like this forever, no matter what game I play and no matter what land I find myself in, wandering, alone, confused. A hunter is a hunter even in a dream. Even if I get bored sometimes, and even if Dr. Hinton accidentally kills me. Even if it gets overwhelming to think about whether or not any of it is real or worth it. I just have to keep hunting, and I'll find my way. And someday, maybe it will be that my arrow is the arrow that will pierce the heavens. If I'm allowed in, that is. I kept going. I kept hunting until finally, the 50th Jin fell. These hunts took me 12 hours and 47 minutes, which means each hunt averaged out to around 15 minutes and 21 seconds per hunt. But this total time is not counting my failed hunts and the time I spent working on new builds. To be more accurate, it was probably around 14.5 hours. Now, to spend even more time working on the script and editing the video together, I have my work cut out for me on this one, don't I? Normally, when I'm keeping notes about these hunts, I label certain things that stood out in each one. If I landed a cool attack, maybe some consecutive flash pods, I'll make note of that so I can reference it later when I'm sharing it with you. But these hunts were so long that pretty much every hunt had everything in it. Every individual hunt had countless dodge combos, countless weak point hits, weak point whiffs, and hundreds of dragon piercers through them all. In the end, I gathered 164 claws, 175 ice plates, 389 scales, 118 horns, 131 tails, 314 carapaces, 37 freezer sacks, 117 certificates, and 31 Jin Dahaad ice gems, and even 25 heavy armor spheres. Yeah, those are the good ones. I decided to keep track of those this time too. They seem to drop a lot from the 8 stars. But most importantly, and long ago if I'm honest, I acquired the titles Jin Dahaad, Chill, Hoarfrost, and Icebound, that I may become, as I always have been, Icebound, but chill. I don't mind. Let's go for another round, Mr. Dahaad. These 50 hunts tested me in a way none of the others have, and I had to adapt if I wanted to survive. It was a new landscape, a place I'd never been, that no one had ever been, facing monsters and challenges and pains that didn't exist until this modern patch. 8-star tempered monsters, terrifying, but not unbeatable. Fear is okay, pain perhaps unavoidable, but persistence is necessary. And I will persist. As will you. I hope you enjoyed, Chavo. Thank you for recommending I fight Jin with bow. Long ago, but I got there. Thank you for watching. I hope you enjoyed, and I hope to see you again soon. Until next time, fellow hunter, good luck, and goodbye.